Janet had sold us our dream home 6 months ago. What she revealed at our housewarming party made us realize we'd been living in someone else's nightmare. The smell of barbecue smoke and fresh paint still lingered in our backyard as I watched everyone mingle around our new patio. 6 months of saving every penny, countless house tours, and endless paperwork had finally led to this moment. My wife was showing off our renovated kitchen to her sister while I kept refilling drinks and trying to play the perfect host. The sun was setting behind our fence, casting this golden glow over everything, and I remember thinking this was exactly what happiness felt like. Janet arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing this bright smile that had convinced us to buy the house in the first place. She'd been our saving grace during the whole buying process, always available for late-night calls when we panicked about inspections or financing. When other realtors barely returned our messages, Janet would drive across town just to show us one more property. She felt more like a friend than someone earning commission off our purchase. Everyone loved her immediately. She had this way of remembering little details about people and making them feel special. Within minutes, she was deep in conversation with my college buddies about their kids, asking my mother-in-law about her garden and complimenting my wife's homemade appetizers. The party energy was perfect, exactly what we'd imagined when we planned this whole thing. Around 8:30, when most people had moved inside to escape the evening chill, Janet suddenly stood up from her chair on the patio. She'd been quieter than usual for the past hour, nursing the same glass of wine and staring at our house with this strange expression. When she cleared her throat and asked for everyone's attention, something in her voice made the entire party go silent. My wife grabbed my arm instinctively. Janet's face had changed completely. The cheerful realtor mask was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. Her hands were shaking as she began speaking about guilt and sleepless nights. She talked about professional ethics and moral obligations in this broken voice that made everyone lean forward to hear better. Then she dropped the bomb about the cemetery. The words hit like physical blows. Former burial ground. Bodies still beneath our foundation. Previous owners reporting unexplained phenomena. Janet's voice grew stronger as she described cold spots in certain rooms, doors opening by themselves, and why the house had been on the market for 2 years before we found it. She'd hidden inspection reports, she claimed, because she needed the commission to pay her mother's medical bills. I felt my world tilting sideways. Every weird little thing about our house suddenly made horrible sense. The way our cat refused to go into the basement. How the temperature in our bedroom always felt different than the rest of the house. Those nights when I'd wake up feeling like someone was watching us sleep. My wife's grip on my arm became painful as Janet continued her confession. People started gathering their things. Conversations died mid-sentence. My college friends looked genuinely disturbed and my mother-in-law was already reaching for her purse. The perfect housewarming party was dissolving into awkward exits and mumbled excuses about early mornings. Janet kept talking, describing specific incidents that previous owners had reported to her privately, begging us to understand her impossible position. My wife was practically vibrating with anger beside me. I could see her mental calculations already happening. Lawsuits, moving costs, finding temporary housing while we figured out our legal options. 6 months of making this house our home, all the money we'd spent on renovations, the mortgage we'd stretched ourselves thin to afford. Everything felt like it was crumbling. But then something shifted in Janet's demeanor. The desperate guilt transformed into something else entirely. Her shaking stopped. A smile started creeping across her face. Not the professional realtor smile, but something mischievous and knowing. When she started laughing, everyone froze. The laughter built until she was practically doubled over, holding her sides and wiping tears from her eyes. Through her giggles, she managed to gasp out the truth. Aspiring actress. Hired by my college friends. Elaborate prank designed specifically for someone obsessed with horror movies. The cemetery story was completely fabricated for my entertainment. The silence that followed was deafening. My brain couldn't process the emotional whiplash fast enough. Relief, anger, embarrassment, and grudging admiration all crashed together. My wife's death grip on my arm relaxed as the reality sank in. We weren't living above buried bodies. Our house wasn't haunted. Our biggest investment wasn't worthless. My college friends were grinning like idiots, clearly thrilled that their plan had worked so perfectly. They'd been planning this for months, apparently. They knew how much I loved being scared, how I'd spend entire weekends binge-watching horror movies and reading ghost stories online. This was their twisted version of a housewarming gift, the ultimate jump scare in my own backyard. Update 1. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Half our guests didn't know whether to laugh or leave. My wife disappeared into the house without saying a word, and I wasn't sure if she was angry at Janet, my friends, or me for having friends capable of something this elaborate. My mother-in-law looked completely scandalized, muttering about inappropriate pranks and wasted worry. Janet, meanwhile, had transformed completely. Gone was any trace of the nervous, guilt-ridden woman from minutes before. She was animated and excited, explaining her acting process and how hard it had been to maintain the facade. She'd method-acted her way through months of guilt, she claimed, really believing in the role to make the performance authentic. My friends were eating it up, asking about her technique and whether she'd consider doing more pranks for them. I found myself caught between admiration and annoyance. The performance had been flawless. Every detail about the cemetery, the previous owner's experiences, even her explanation about needing commission money for her mother's bills, it had all felt completely genuine. But the emotional roller coaster was exhausting. Going from contentment to horror to relief in the span of 20 minutes had left me feeling wrung out. My wife emerged from the house carrying a bottle of wine and wearing an expression I couldn't read. She walked straight to Janet and poured her a fresh glass without saying anything. Then she looked at my college friends with the smile that didn't reach her eyes and told them they'd officially won the prize for most creative housewarming gift. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. But something unexpected started happening as the evening continued. People began sharing their own experiences with being scared or pranked. My mother-in-law, who'd seemed so disapproving, started telling stories about elaborate jokes from her college sorority days. Neighbors who'd been quietly leaving began drifting back to hear more about the prank's planning and execution. Janet became the center of attention in a completely different way. She talked about her acting classes, her day job, and how she'd gotten into character for this performance. She'd actually researched our house's real history, studied the previous owner's genuine reasons for selling, and crafted her story around elements that would feel believable to someone who knew the property's actual background. The twist nobody saw coming was how much Janet had enjoyed the whole experience. She'd been struggling in her acting classes, feeling like she couldn't connect with emotional scenes or dramatic moments. But spending months in character, building up to this one performance, had given her confidence she'd never had before. She was glowing as she described how natural the acting had felt, how she'd found her rhythm by really inhabiting the guilt and anxiety she'd created for her character. My friends were already brainstorming other scenarios they could hire her for. Birthday surprises, anniversary pranks, maybe even helping other people who wanted to give their horror-loving friends memorable scares. Janet was genuinely excited about the possibilities, talking about developing different characters and storylines. The party ended up running much later than we'd planned. People who'd been ready to leave during Janet's confession stayed until nearly midnight, fascinated by the behind-the-scenes details of the prank's conception and execution. My wife seemed to relax as the evening progressed, even laughing when Janet described some of the improvisation she'd done during earlier conversations with party guests. But lying in bed that night, I kept replaying those moments when I'd believed every word. The sick feeling in my stomach when I'd thought our dream home was built on graves. The immediate calculations about lawyers and moving costs and starting over somewhere else. My friends had wanted to give me the ultimate scare, and they'd succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Update 2. What happened next caught everyone off guard. 2 days after the party, Janet called me directly instead of going through my friends. She sounded different, not the professional realtor voice, not the guilty confessor, and not the excited actress. She sounded nervous in a way that seemed completely genuine. She wanted to meet in person to discuss something important about our house. Not another prank, she insisted. Something real that she'd discovered while researching our property for her performance. My first instinct was skepticism. How could we trust anything she said after such an elaborate deception? But something in her voice convinced me to agree to a coffee meeting. When we met the next afternoon, Janet looked exhausted. She explained that while researching our house's history to make her cemetery story believable, she'd stumbled across information that actually was concerning. Not supernatural concerns, but structural ones that hadn't been properly disclosed during our purchase process. The house had been built in the 1970s by a contractor who'd later been investigated for using substandard materials and cutting corners on foundation work. Several homes from the same builder in our neighborhood had experienced significant foundation problems within 10 to 15 years. Most had been quietly repaired and reinforced, but the work was expensive and not always covered by insurance. Janet had found records of foundation inspections and repairs for houses on either side of ours but couldn't find similar documentation for our property. She'd been planning to mention this discovery to us after the prank, but then got caught up in the excitement of her performance and forgot entirely. It wasn't until she was driving home from the party that she remembered what she'd originally wanted to tell us. The irony was overwhelming. We just survived thinking our house was built on a cemetery only to discover it might actually have serious structural issues that could cost us thousands to repair. Janet kept apologizing, explaining that she'd only intended to research enough to make her fake story convincing, not to uncover real problems with our property. My wife's reaction was predictably intense when I shared Janet's latest revelation. After the emotional whiplash of the prank, dealing with potentially genuine house problems felt like being kicked while we were already down. She wanted to immediately hire an independent inspector to assess our foundation regardless of the cost. But here's where things took another unexpected turn. My college friends, feeling guilty about their prank potentially leading to the discovery of real problems, offered to split the cost of a professional structural inspection. They'd been so proud of their elaborate joke, but knowing it might have revealed actual issues with our home made them feel responsible for whatever we might find. The inspection took 3 days and revealed exactly what Janet had suspected. Our foundation had several stress points that would need attention within the next few years. Not an immediate emergency, but definitely something that would require professional repair to prevent more serious damage. The estimated cost was substantial but manageable if we planned carefully. What surprised me most was how Janet handled this discovery. Instead of disappearing once her information was delivered, she took personal responsibility for helping us navigate the situation. She researched contractors, got multiple quotes, and even negotiated with some of her professional contacts to get us better rates on the repair work. She also did something unexpected with her acting career. The success of our prank had given her tremendous confidence, and she'd booked 3 small roles in local theater productions within 2 weeks of our party. But instead of pursuing more elaborate performance pranks, she decided to focus on legitimate acting opportunities and use her realtor connections to help other people avoid the kind of problems we'd discovered. My friend's elaborate joke had accidentally led to preventing much more expensive problems down the road. If Janet hadn't researched our house's history for her performance, we might not have learned about the foundation issues until they became serious enough to cause visible damage. By then, repairs would have been much more costly and disruptive. Final update. 6 months later, our foundation repairs are complete and our house feels more solid than ever. The work was exactly as expensive as predicted, but splitting the cost with my college friends made it manageable. More importantly, we have peace of mind knowing our biggest investment is structurally sound. Janet became something unexpected in our lives, not quite a friend, but more than a former realtor. She checks in periodically to see how the repairs held up and shares updates about her acting career. She landed a recurring role in a local theater company and credits her performance at our party with helping her find the confidence to pursue bigger opportunities. My relationship with my college friends evolved too. Their prank had been elaborate and successful, but learning that it accidentally revealed real problems with our house made them more thoughtful about the potential consequences of their jokes. They still appreciate good scares and elaborate plans, but they're more careful about considering unintended outcomes. The most surprising development was how the whole experience affected my wife and me. Going through the emotional extremes of thinking our house was haunted, discovering it was a prank, then learning about actual structural problems, and finally addressing those problems together strengthened our partnership in ways we hadn't expected. We learned we could handle crisis situations as a team, even when the crises came in rapid succession. We decided to throw another party once the repairs were finished. Same guest list, same menu, but with very different ground rules about surprise performances. Janet was invited but asked to attend as herself rather than any character she might have developed. My friends were welcome but warned that any future pranks would result in them paying for the consequences, whatever those might be. The second party was quieter but more meaningful. People were relaxed in a way they hadn't been during the first gathering when everyone was performing their roles as appreciative guests. This time, conversations felt more genuine, connections deeper. Janet told stories about her theater work without the pressure of maintaining any facade. My friends shared memories and inside jokes without scheming about future elaborate surprises. Looking back, the whole experience taught me something important about the difference between manufactured scares and real fears. Horror movies and ghost stories are fun because you know they're not real. When I believed Janet's confession about our house, the fear was different, heavier, more paralyzing. It affected our sleep, our finances, our entire sense of security. Real fear isn't entertainment, it's overwhelming and exhausting. But real relief is more powerful too. When Janet revealed the cemetery story was fake, the joy was intense in a way that planned surprises never achieve. And when we discovered and addressed the actual foundation problems, the satisfaction of taking control and solving real issues felt more meaningful than any fictional resolution could have been. Our house still isn't perfect. The repairs left some cosmetic marks that we're slowly addressing, and we're more aware now of maintenance issues that come with older homes. But it's genuinely our home in a way it wasn't before. We've literally reinforced its foundation and survived its secrets, both imaginary and real. Janet's performance was flawless, but the most important part of the whole experience was everything that happened after the curtain fell. The real relationships, genuine problems, and authentic solutions that emerged from her fabricated crisis. She gave me the ultimate scare, but more importantly, she accidentally gave us the opportunity to make our home truly solid in every sense of the word. Sometimes the best stories are the ones where the twist isn't the ending, but the beginning of something more meaningful than anyone expected.